Good morning. My name's James Danger, and this is one of the videos I'm making for my KPI and IVF series. This one is about using FertAid for developing staff quality assurance. So if you're a doctor, how can you be sure the same embryo will be selected for transfer by all your laboratory staff? One way, of course, is to use AI, but you don't know much about the embryo, it's just a number. If you're a client, how can you be sure that the same embryo will be selected for transfer by all the clinic's laboratory staff? One way is to have confidence in your staff's visual assessment skills, and testing these skills may be found at FertAid.com. Or you could just use an AI program, but it won't tell you much about what the embryo looks like. So FertAid.com is found at FertAid, well, this is my local one, but it's FertAid.com, and is an online EQA program for small clinics, large clinics, multi-lab clinics, global subscription, also for training and education. It has a number of schemes in andrology, concentration, I'll describe these later, but also embryology and also ultrasound. And what it does is provide a series of quality assurance schemes each year with a number of releases in each one. The clinic can subscribe to any or all of these, and if the staff complete all the tasks, they can produce in one page a EQA summary of their clinic's performance relative to everybody else in the scheme. So this is a graphic I produced. It's a bit like a Levi-Jennings chart. These are the plus and minus variations from the mean. The arrows point up and down above the mean. Whole dots are within one standard deviation. A dotted one is between 1 and 2. Yellow is between 2 and 3. And if there's a red one that's above 3, then you're in trouble. So basically, this thing there's a scheme for andrology. These are for motility, morphology, concentration, using hematometer or by macula, estimating immunobeads as sperm antibodies by immunobeads, sperm DNA fragment by halosperm, and estimate of sperm vitality. In embryology, there's a scheme for assessing pronuclear schemes, embryo fragmentation, early cleavage, late cleavage, human oocytes, and then you can rank embryos into, in order of preference, both in static images or in time lapse. You can also, there are some schemes I've written for estimating endometrial thickness and ultrasound, but there are some limitations there on embryo image quality. I also run a scheme for sperm motility analyzer. This one's in Australia. It could be done anywhere. It's mainly designed for where a clinic has lots and lots of different machines. They supply the sample, they freeze it, and I allocate a test for them. They enter the data, and FertAid then does the processing and does the independent reporting on their performance. So many clinics do enroll in an external EQA program for accreditation purposes. And many of these, they all vary, and I'm not that particularly interested in all the other ones. They've all been around for a long time, but they usually send out a small number of samples each year, which one staff member should theoretically assess, and this represents their whole EQA program. But I know from chatting with people that for a lot of these schemes, a sample is sent out, and everyone or selected members will process it. Then they submit a average value, which isn't quite the same as doing spot testing as you would in a factory type EQA program. But they're centered on clinics, not individual staff members. But my criticism of it is it treats the IVF as a factory whereby you're just doing individual sampling, spot checking, and seeing if you're picking up random errors. Whereas I believe what we should be doing is testing staff members' visual skills on a laboratory basis. So I'm being quite naughty saying the next to useless. I don't like, that's why I wrote this program. I used them for quite a few years when I ran IE programs early, and I actually got rid of it because I just hated the concept, the one sample which you had to submit and then wait 2 months for it to be processed and released in a static sort of way. It just didn't, for me, meet my needs. I intended more to focus on staff members and build a clinic's confidence by looking at the skills of each individual scientist. So these are the schemes that I do. Some are current, some are no longer current. Sperm morphology, sperm motility. These are a slideshow of a number of sperm that you can then estimate morphology. These are a video. Sperm concentration, also slideshows. This one is for and the number of beads being bound to individual sperms, an estimate of anti-sperm antibodies. Halosperm is once again slideshow. This they used to run for a long time in Australia. This is where people send out a sample, but that has now been done away with because, well, clinics don't really care anymore. Teratospermic index is basically they're set up for a couple of clinics, but hardly anyone uses that anymore. But I do run a sperm vitality index EQ, which a lot of people like, and surprisingly, it's a very popular one. But I use the same system to look at embryology, oocytes, pronuclear, cleavage, fragmentation, blastocyst EQA, rank embryos or oocytes to blastocyst 1 to whatever, just seeing how well you can rate them compared to everybody else. I've done that both with static images and with time lapse, both for assessing embryos with time lapse or ranking embryos by time lapse. I also, as I said before, run a thing for estimating follicle diameter, which I think is unique in the world. And there's some comments I can make about that. No one particularly is interested in it. No one wants to know how bad their nurses are. But the system does allow you to actually estimate people's ability to assess the diameter. Do they actually know what they're doing? And another one for endometrial thickness. And my approach to this has been to develop a similar engine that drives all these programs. So I developed unique algorithms, which I'll show you in a minute, that allow sperm and embryos to all be treated the same way. As I've shown in that previous graph, I've been able to develop a system whereby all these different paradigms or all these different parameters can be processed and put on one page to look at performance of the clinic and individuals. So just running through it very quickly. This is all available on my FertAid website. One key to QAP Online is while the subscription is clinic-based, individuals staff are enrolled in selected schemes. Each staff member may then compare their performance against other clinic members or a range of other comparisons, including skilled participants globally or locally or selected peers. Now, in fact, when I wrote this in 2003, I was using the extra scheme for having a selected peers. But after a while, I realized that people weren't that interested. So even though you can enroll people as a peer, I've actually haven't focused a lot of attention on that. Enrollments can be as a trainee, professional, as a peer, as I just said. This allows new staff to participate in a quality program without their contribution being used in the final stats, but you can view their performance to everybody else. It's quite a unique way of doing training. While QAP Online does not offer formal certification of competency, I think each clinic must decide what their own level of competency is. A certificate of participation and performance against other participants is available for each scheme. At the heart of QAP is a single subscription of one clinic that may include multiple laboratories and staff. The quality supervisor or one staff member is nominated as the supervisor, may then examine the performance of your clinic or each laboratory against all other groups, forming an external quality assurance program. A QAP group may contain an unlimited number of laboratories with individuals allocated to a specific laboratory. In this way, the quality manager may review the performance of any laboratory staff as an internal quality control process. It's just in the reporting option. So when you submit an answer, you submit it both for your own professional skills and which laboratory and which group. So you can then basically analyze the process differently. Regardless of the laboratory, the quality manager has full autonomy over staffing, laboratory location, so you can move staff from one lab to another, and performance reviews. This can be for internal reviews, accreditation, or annual performance review. So here, I'm saying you can print out a performance report for each staff member. So when they have their annual review, you can say, look how well you've done, you have participated, you haven't participated, etc. So one QAP group, many laboratories, most companies have more than one. I'm sorry, I'm repeating myself here. All QAP online reviews are based on deviation from the trim population mean. So basically everything is reduced to standard deviation from the mean. And I use the trim mean so that the first 10 submissions are taken into account. And when there's more than 10 submissions, the program recalculates mean standard deviation, deleting any outliers more than 3 standard deviations from the initial mean. Individual laboratory staff and clinic performance are displayed as standard deviations from the mean. This means that reviewing each scheme is easy given that the method of analysis is constant over all schemes. So While QAP may ask several questions that differ between each scheme, there is always one numeric question that is central to each scheme. This is called the QAP key question, and it's always numeric, and that is the one we're using for all our things. So it's either what is the percent normal forms, what is percent fragmentation, or it could be a computer form. What is the embryo score or the blastocyst score based on this? That's the scores I'll show you in a minute. But how do you do this for qualitative tests such as grading an embryo? Well, FertAid's has developed a unique computation, which now the current term is algorithm, for each scheme that converts a number of qualitative questions into a number that largely reflects quality. This means that embryo grading can be reviewed in a similar sort of way as sperm morphology, and it works better in some schemes than others. But basically, the data you get tells you whether you'll score, whether you are consistently scoring that embryo at a higher value or lower value. So even though it's just a score that you can compare people. And so that each scheme, there's a defined structure for each scheme in QAP Online. Each scheme repeats annually with different images. I've got a spelling mistake there that, by the way, has been there since 2003. Go figure. Each scheme is composed of at least 12 releases, of which contain an image or an embryo or questions, and always a key QAP questions. So there's one single subscription. So a clinic pays one amount of money in Australian dollars, euros. Well, actually, I just basically, it's now done a euro. I've done away with the euros and American dollars. You can just pay by credit card and get instant access. Provides access to all clinic staff for any scheme within the subscription, which may be a complex subscription, is made very easy. And so I don't need to worry about this. So let's get down to nitty gritty. I'm going to start with a fairly complex scheme, which is pro-nucleus score. So every time everyone enrolls, they are enrolled in one or more of these schemes, depending on what your supervisor wants. Most people only do 2 or 3, right? And I'll explain some of these as I go forward. Basically, I take a scheme, and so for, say, pro-nucleus scheme, I'm using Lynn Scott's. I'd just like to acknowledge Lynn Scott's contribution to that, even though she's passed away some years ago. So she spent a lot of time at the pro-nucleus stage, I think, with considerable insight, and developed a scoring system, Z1 to Z4 or 5, based upon how the pronuclei appear at 17 hours post-HCG. So you can have a whole series of questions, cytoplasmic inclusions, using Scott's definition, is there a halo, how many pronuclei are there, juxtaposition of pronuclei, etc., etc. They each have a number of series of options, which Lynn Scott described, and it goes something like this. So each question is given a value. So you can nominate, this could be like twice the importance of the other one, but for this case, they all have the same value. And for each question, there is a series of options, equal, mature, unequal, and I've rated those 1 to 1, 10 to 1, so that whichever option you submit, you get a score, and then you add up all the different scores for the whole lot to give you a number out of 100. So once again, you can see the synchrony, number of pronuclei on the left, on the right. So I'm just trying to orientate it left and right, etc., etc. And at the end of it, you submit all the. Let me just go back and see. I'm getting ahead of myself here. I can do the same thing for blastocysts, but whereas unlike Lynn Scott's for pronuclei, Dave Gardner's scheme for blastocysts isn't it hard, very simple, which half is really quite the problem. It should be far more complex. And his scheme is based on what an embryo looks like, but then you have to add a time component to it. So the questions are, what stage of blastocyst formation is evident from the image? And that's this value of 4. So they each have a similar value. Describe the inner cell mass inside the trifectoderm. Is the rate of development normal? So this is where the time element comes in. And for the stage, I've given a value of 10 for hatch blastocyst down to 1. And the inner cell mass, I've given it 5 to 1 based on Gardner schemes, trifectoderm, and normal development. So when you actually answer those questions, that value will add up to 100. But I've put more value in what stage is at, double the value to all the other components. Likewise, if you're doing ranking, for this one, I have 4 videos where you select 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, okay, this one's got 1, 2, 3. And this is for a different scheme, but in this case, there's 4 embryos, and you ask to rank. So you rank A, B, C, or D first, second, third, or fourth, and then you then compare your assessment with everybody else. And in this case, when I've done it, I've agreed that A was the best, most popular one, C was the second most popular one, D was the third most popular one, and B was the fourth most popular one. And then you can compute based on the relative value of each one a score, which I got 34 out of 34. 100%, aren't I clever? But the bottom line is you can then have a scoring system of trying to grade how you rank embryos compared to everybody else. And the more that you disagree with other people, the lower your ranking score is. So when you look at the standard deviation graph, instead of looking at the mean, what you're here is you're looking for people above the mean that ranking correctly. I haven't done that particularly well, I must admit. I did this back about 2006. For morphology, this is an example where it says both educational and EQA. So each month there's 2 images. The first is a series of sperm, each labeled A to Z, whatever. And then you're asked to describe, in this case, describe sperm C, this one here. And you're asked to describe the sperm head, the morphology of the sperm head, the mid-piece tail, and then you're asked to describe the acrosome, and then you're asked to say whether A, B, C, D, etc. are all normal. And then the second part is where you have a slideshow of different sperm, and you go through the slideshow one by one, and you come up with 8% normal forms. Excuse me. Likewise with blastocyst, in this case, showing a slightly hatching blaster, you're asked what stage it's at, the inner cell mass, because these are all animated GIF files, so there's 3 or 4 or 5 images through each blastocyst. You're asked to make a decision on each of these different criteria. You see, you just nominate one, and basically it gives you the score. And when you're all finished, it calculates a embryo score. And even though this is not particularly good, you can see that my embryo score was 75 and 0.3 standard deviation from the mean of 74. And so what it then does is show you where you are in your score compared to everybody else. So I have overestimated compared to everybody else. And in all fairness, I don't think this blastocyst scheme works really 100%, but it actually works enough to give you a sense of whether you are over or underestimating the quality of blastocyst. But you can, as an individual, go back and see how your score compared to everybody else's. So I agree the inner cell mass is loosely packed. I agree the inner cell mass is on the second quarter. I agreed that the trifectoderm is good, and I said the embryo is normal in terms of rate it's developing. But what I can also do for any scheme, it's a universal process. I can go back and look at my score, my bias score, relative to time from 2 years now, the last 24, I think it is. Or you can also look at for bias. This is for the embryos by the score. So you're looking for the poorest quality to the highest quality embryo and seeing whether there's any bias. So I would say here that over time, there is a slight downward trend in my assessing of blastocysts. I'm assessing them harder over time, but there's no bias between good or bad. I can also go back and look at comments that each other person has made and say, see how other people have described it. And you can also go back and look at your performance of this particular one relative to all the others. So this is my performance for the year. And you can go back for anyone. And so if you go back to pro-nuclear scheme, you can see here that you can click on a question button and see how you're behaved by everybody else. But for each question, you can go back and see how other people have scored it. So for this one here, juxtaposition of pro-nuclear, I don't think these images have scaled down particularly well. You can see that how, I agreed. I said it was they're strongly together, which of course they are. And I agree with 70. But there's 7 people think they're close, and 2, you can't understand. People just have a different view of it. This is the problem. And likewise with follicle scanning, what I've done here is I have a bar at the top that says this bar is 1 centimeter. So no matter how big or small your screen is, you can say for your screen setting, this bar is 10 millimeters. So what you do is you click on the bar. I'm going to measure, calibrate the first one. You can there, that sets a standard, right? And then you go and click on each individual uh, dimension. So you can do one click there and get a score, and one click there and get a score. And basically, it's the number of pixels between the two clicks translated into millimeters by this grading. And you can do number as you like. And then what it does, create an average diameter, which you submit. And in this case, I was 0.02 standard deviations from the mean. You can also go and produce a report, which isn't really a certificate. It's just a report on your performance, where you are given a mark, 91%, based on how many standard deviations you were from the mean. So if you got 3 points if you're within one, and the 2 points if you're outside of one, etc. And the second part of this, of course, that first part was always an individual, but now you can go back as a supervisor and look at the assessment of your staff. And if you have supervisor status, you can then manage. There's 4 different parts to this supervisor module they wrote. One is just to look at details about laboratories, and you can add stuff and take stuff off and nominate them as co-reporters. In descriptions, you can subscribe to different schemes. You can then nominate which schemes of a subscription you want to use. You can then manage whether you want to be part of your reporting or not. And then you can enroll staff at different criteria. And there's also a third one, reporting, which is the heart and soul of QAP Online, where you can look at the individual reporting of your staff, both summaries, monthly or yearly summaries, individual staff, and a few other things. Some of these things I think I've developed over time, but no longer am I interested in them. I think that they haven't been something which clinics have looked at. So I explored the ability to do some of these things, but a lot of these things don't work anymore. And there is a maintenance thing where you can do error correction and you can do, mark for follow-up. I was really keen on that back in the 2005 to 2015, but in the last 10 years or so, I've become less interested in that. But this is what you can do. So you can click on if you're a supervisor, and you have a whole lot of different ways of drilling down through your data. So this is a one-page summary of the clinic's performance relative to everybody else. You can look at any one individual year and see all the different schemes. And basically these numbers here tell you if it's blue, you are within standard deviation. If it's yellow, you're within one. And then if you're more than one, it's red, and more than 3, it's more than 2, you're yellow, and more than 3, you're black. So yellow is 1, blue is +1 to -1, yellow is between 1 and 2, red is between 2 and 3, and black is more than 3. And you can look at this. So basically, you're looking at here is this particular scheme. 11 of the 12 releases have been within 1 standard deviation of the mean, but 1 month you're actually below. You can go back and look at that. You can look at your performance month by month, or you can look at each scheme year by year. So this is one year by year, and you could either month all the schemes in 1 month, or pick out any one scheme and look at that, and then break that scheme down into individual staff members' performance. And each of these, you can then go back and look at each individual staff members through all their different schemes. So basically, for any 1 year, if you look at the BUS EQA program for 2025 for this clinic, there were 7 replies from this clinic out of 31 replies. So my numbers have been 4 in the last couple of years as clinics become bigger and bigger and they opt out just to do their own EQA. But you can see here that all the schemes, they are all within 1 standard deviation mean. They're probably on the low side of the mean, but the last one, they achieved, for whatever reason, the mean score was between 1 and 2 standard deviation below the mean. You can click on any one of these. And I think this is for this one down here, 2025. And this is the individual contribution of each of the different staff members. And even though the quality of this image is actually poor, and I apologize for that, you can see people being enrolled as professionals. There's an associate, And those people, you can see their performance, but their data is not included in the actual performance of the clinic. And so for each month, you can look at a standard deviation and CV of their performance and relative to everybody else. And then you can go back and look at the summary of that whole scheme's activity, the whole 12 releases. And then inside your reporting, you can say that 11 out of 12 were within one standard deviation of the mean. But you can also, for each one of these staff members, each submission, you can click on each one of these and see how they have graded the embryo. So this would have been one of these two. You would click on the staff member, and there's the which I've scrubbed out, and you can go through each staff member and see how they are assessing it and make a decision on whether they need different training. But you can go back for each question, look at your staff's performance relative for each different question. And as I said, for each one, you can go and select a staff member and look at their performance in any 1 year, basically for all their performance. So this person has got a wide range of, sometimes for their pronuclear, there is a bit of variability. But for any one of these, let's say the hemocytometer or the macular chamber, this one here, you can click on that and see their own. This is an individual staff member, this staff member, whose number blocked out. You can see their performance each month. You can see the mean. Some of these. So there's a concentration, so they are within the values, I think, range from what you'll normally see. So this particular case, they overestimated by more than 2 standard deviations from the mean. So they said it was 27 and the mean was 2.9. That's for the 2 standard deviations from the mean. Okay. Don't think I did that very well. And you can go back and look at the same thing for each month. You can look at the monthly performance and look at how they've gone each month, getting the same outcome. And then at the end of the day, just to go back and finish off, you can drill down through each staff member, then you can come back up and look at the performance each year, for a whole year, each individual performance of the clinic, and then click up that drill up to get a one-page summary for the last 2.5 years. I did have a lot of really good graphics on my site using Fusion graphics out of India, but they suddenly withdrew the right for running with ASP, so I no longer have these facilities. But I was able to graph these data very well. But in reality, I've added this because this is a line Weaver Burke plot, putting standard deviations for the mean, one standard, 2, 3 standard deviations. And I've tried to do this in a calculated way. This is my own programming to generate the same sort of graph as you would expect to see in a line Weaver Burke plot. So just to finish up, one way is to have confidence in your staff's visual assessment skills that can be found at FertAid.com. FertAid is just a tool that is both educational and a quality management tool. And I hope it helps and gives you confidence that despite what the AI companies suggest, most embryologists are skilled at grading and the assessment of embryos in a very positive way. Most clinics have little interest in participating in external quality assurance scheme, except to meet their accreditation needs. If they weren't being accredited, they're not interested in joining. They have no interest in training their staff or looking at their staff's performance. So I'm just going to get a little bit narky here at the end. There are several EQA schemes in IVF laboratories available, which in a general matter treat IVF laboratories as a process to be randomly sampled to confirm reporting is consistent with other laboratories. That is how an industrial-based EQA program works. That's fine, but what's being tested is not a mechanistic process, but a visual assessment process. My approach has been to test each staff member's visual skills are consistent with each other, both within and without outside of the clinic. And my argument is by ensuring all staff are describing a sperm morphology or blastocyst the same way, then one builds confidence that any staff will make the same decisions, be it sperm morphology or day 5 embryo grading. I also believe that education assessments are both interlinked and continuous, and that's why I developed a system that provides feedback at the same time as submission, and that enrollments can be either at a training level or as a professional level. I've applied the concept that competency is not a once-off determination, but a continuous reaffirmation the one's interpretation of gametes and embryos are consistent regardless of experience. That's why I applied the challenges on a monthly basis and did away with requirements for deadlines to complete the tasks. You can, in fact, go back and do all your schemes from one in your time. What I'm interested not so much in the timing of it, but in the difference in different quality embryos or sperm that you're assessing. One of the great things that clinics like is that one can complete the task retrospectively at any time. This allows staff to batch test. That is, the test is not a time factor, but it's an image factor. That is, say you can say once a month you'll sit down and do 3 months for half an hour, or you may want to do it 10 minutes for every month. But the bottom line is you've been tested each year against different quality of embryos and different quality of sperm, and it's that range in quality that we're looking at rather than the temporal one. This is why many clinics use it as a training tool to enroll staff in previous releases, as a trainee to assess their interpretation with previous submissions without compromising the EQA component of the program. I wrote this program in 2003 and has worked every day for the last 23 years, providing clinics with an accreditation tool to confirm comparative performance of their staff and to give the senior clinical members and their clients improved confidence that all staff behave in the same way. And thousands of IVF staff have undertaken this over the last 23 years. However, when I recently approached most senior societies about seeking support to extend and modernise this system, not one society expressed any interest, in particular the Asian Society, Spire. I'm very disappointed. When I approached many IVF companies, support companies to provide support for free training and testing, not one person, not one clinic was interested. I approached 450 clinics that provide support to IVF, some big ones, and not one clinic has been expressed an interest in supporting the concept of training and education. So after 23 years and reaching 76 years of age after starting IVF in 77 from a PhD in embryology, I have concluded that despite the thousands of publications on IVF and those that promote AI assessments, the medical and scientific staff all believe that their initial training is sufficient and they are skilled. However, if I was a client seeking IVF to have a family, one major question must be how skilled are the staff in how they grade embryos? And since they're making the decisions about my embryos, are they all making the same decision? My name's James Stanger. I'm an embryologist. My 50 years experience. Excuse me, I apologise. These videos from my YouTube channel are an attempt to bridge the gap between information you may need for your fertility treatment and the most recent publications available to your staff. I'm not a medical person, and this information is not medical advice, but it may help you in knowing what questions to ask about your treatment with your doctor and maybe to help in understanding your advice. If you like what I'm doing, press subscribe and leave a comment and a like. I want to just acknowledge my FertAid, which is a sponsor, which has been doing this, but in fact, as you can see, it's a challenge. So I'd like to say thank you. IVF, I know, is a personal journey that involves the actions of many technologies, many skills, many bits of information and staff, and it helps to understand all aspects of that journey. I hope this information may be of value, and if you like it provided, please tell other IVF clients about this service and please subscribe. And that I will say thank you and good night.